Now we have an excellent guest for you, and with a documentary that is right up our league. It's called The Best Government Money Can Buy, so you know it's in our wheelhouse. But the filmmaker, Francis Megahy, is right here in the studio. Look at this. Francis,
hi there.
All right, I want to talk to you about the movie, but let's watch the trailer first so people get a sense of it.
Okay, great.
All right, let's go for it.
Washington, D.C., the capital city of the richest and most powerful nation on earth. In the last Congress, lobbyists spent a staggering amount of money.
Now, what a return on investment. $700 billion bailout.
It's about power.
You wonder why civil rights are being violated.
This is the ability, for example, to determine whether or not your son goes off to war.
They have more lobbyists than there are members of Congress.
How can so many people relate to only 535 members of Congress?
It's mostly behind-the-scenes stuff.
The right word in the hall or the right expression can make a world of difference.
You have lobbying organizations that offer $500,000, $700,000, $1 million to some of the more prominent members who retire.
The line between those who are inside and outside of Congress is not very clearly drawn.
It might seem undemocratic that lobbyists write legislation oftentimes.
You can redress your grievances. That is an inherent right, and it's something that we need to protect.
They're campaigning all the time.
That revolves around this persistent, endless quest for money.
You have to spend so much time doing this fundraising. When do you have time for the public business?
You knock on that door just so many times.
It's ethics light on the Hill. This is a constant struggle. There's no beginning, middle, and end. There's only a middle.
You see relationships developed over time. You see favors done over time.
Many of them would walk over both grandmothers laid end to end with pleats on, if that's what it took to get elected.
It's sapping their energy, and it's dulling their idealism.
Oh my gosh, public funding is where does it stop?
There's a tiny group that tends not to favor it, and they're called incumbents. And as it turns out, they're the only ones with votes.
The bottom line is it's a business.
All right, and as we told you, Francis Megahy, the filmmaker that is responsible for that lovely movie, is here. Francis, let's talk some numbers first.
Sure.
Okay. How many lobbyists are there?
Well, there are 14,000 registered lobbyists, but there are thousands and thousands more, because many who are supposed to register don't register, and they simply say that they're giving strategic advice. For example, Tom Daschle, he worked for a law firm which made $5.1 million, I should say, in 2 years during the time he was there, and he was giving strategic advice. Well, nobody can define the difference between strategic advice and lobbying at that level.
Right, and my prediction is that so many more people will soon be giving strategic advice because it's seen as untoward to be a lobbyist, right? And people, you know, it's an ugly word, right? So consultant is so much more pleasant. So is advisor, and so, you know, some of the lower level people, if you were, you know, worked on one of the committees, you were a staff member, it's okay to be a lobbyist. But for Tom Daschle, of course, he's not a lobbyist. He's just, he's very strategic. Right?
But many famous figures are. I mean, Trent Lott, Denny Hastert, you know, these guys are in the same company and they're lobbyists. They were amongst the people who were hired by the financial services industry to fight a bill that was passed earlier this year, re-regulating the industry, which, by the way, recruited almost 1,500 lobbyists to fight against re-regulation from the beginning of 2009 until the bill was passed.
Also, they're Republicans, so that, you know, they're a little bit more brazen. You know, like, yeah, we love lobbyists anyway. What's the problem?
Yeah, but this is not a party issue.
No, no, it's not.
It's an equal. They're both equal offenders, and
well, there I
special
disagree slightly.
Well, I could give you some frightening figures about that.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Let's frighten me.
Yeah.
Frighten me.
Okay. Well, the first thing is that this year, until 2 days ago, the Democrats had outraised the Republicans in campaign finance contributions by $178 million.
Now,
That's
the
one
parties
figure.
have. The parties
yes,
have.
the parties
Right,
have.
but outside groups give, I think by a 7-1 margin in this election cycle, give more to Republicans.
Yeah,
because
but it may only level the playing field. The interest of the special interest is getting votes for what they want, and they'll give the money to anybody who's going to vote on that bill the way they want.
Absolutely.
They don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Absolutely, and the Democrats will take that money. Trust me. Okay,
they have to.
No, I understand that. It's just my only argument, and don't get me wrong, is that the Republican Party is a wholly owned subsidiary of corporate America that does a great amount of the giving through lobbyists, et cetera, et cetera. And the Democratic Party is a largely owned subsidiary of corporate America. And there are a couple of guys like Feingold and Franken and Bernie Sanders that you could say, yeah, they take campaign money, but they don't seem to be selling out for it, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But, the financial services industry has given more traditionally to the Democrats than it has to the Republicans. Because, you've got to look at what bills get passed and the form they get passed in. And most of the Obama bills have been passed with a Democratic majority, of course, and that means they got more than the people on the other side.
Francis, I think there's two reasons for that. I mean, there's many, but the two main ones I would point out are, one, New York is a blue state, and so in the financial industry is in New York, right? So they almost always have Democratic senators, not almost always, but generally, certainly over the last 10 years, et cetera. So who gets the most amount of money from the financial industry? Number one, by far and away, is Chuck Schumer, who's a Democrat from New York.
Yeah, of course.
And now number two is Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York.
Yeah.
And then the second reason is because Democrats push for reform, whether it's real or it's not real. But when they push for reform, then their lobbyists are forced to play ball and say, oh, okay. If you're going to change things around, I need to buy you.
Well,
right?
What the lobbyists try and do then is mitigate the change.
Of course, exactly.
So that, we've seen a financial services bill, but it didn't re-erect the Chinese walls between being a checkbook bank and trading. That they managed to stave off by spending a huge amount of money.
Well, it's shocking, yeah.
It is shocking.
Well, to me, it's the most normal thing in the world because I agree with you. This is the number one issue.
Yeah.
Because until you solve this issue, you're not going to solve any other issue.
That's absolutely right.
So now talk to me. Let's go back to the numbers for a second.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how much they spend.
Well, if you are a member of the House, if you don't raise, on average, $2,000 a day, every day for the 2 years you're there, you won't get elected. If you're a member of the Senate, you have to raise $3,300 a day, every day for the 6 years you're there. Jeez. And if you become elected either to the Senate or to the House, on your first day you will go to meet your caucus. And one of the things they will tell you is where your first fundraiser is. Well, I can't tell you where it is, but I can tell you when it is. It's the next day.
I mean, look, when you see these numbers, and then, raw dollar-wise, for example, since 2000, $13 billion spent on lobbyists, okay? And then in just the last 2 years, we got $6.7 billion spent, right? So you see an acceleration. In the last 2 years, they spent as much as they did in the 8 years before that, right?
Right.
And partly because of the reform, whenever there's reform, lobbyists have to go in and really make sure that there actually is no real reform, right? That's when they're busiest. And partly because of Citizens United that has now unleashed this to a much greater degree.
Yeah, but Obama's very legislative agenda has been a boon to K Street.
That's right. Yep.
Tony Podesta, who's the brother of John Podesta, who was Obama's transition chief and has one of the biggest lobbying companies in Washington, since Obama was elected, has doubled the number of employees he had. Because having a big legislative agenda means corporations have a lot to fight. And the way they fight it is by channeling money into campaign contributions.
That is undoubtedly true. Now, that is not something against Obama. That's good. He was trying to do...
just the way it is.
Right. And
however, Obama did deal the possibility of an alternative to this system a huge blow when he decided not to take public financing. and that you remember there was all that argument between him and McCain. He told McCain he would take public financing if McCain would, and then he changed his mind because, being a pragmatist, he realized he could raise more money than he would get from public financing, that he was going to outraise McCain. And unfortunately, the way these things go, the guy with the most money or the woman with the most money tends to win the election. And then there was a myth as well about his campaign, which was that the money he got came from small donors on the internet. Well, actually, large corporations put more money into his campaign. The employees of Goldman Sachs bundled, which is to say they put all the money together for you. You don't have to, call 300 people. They bundled almost $800,000 for his election campaign.
They were the #1 contributor to Obama's campaign.
Correct.
Right. Now, both things did happen.
I'm telling you a lot of things you know.
No, but that's all right. But that's why I like the movie, because I think it drives to the heart of this very, very important issue.
Right.
So, but to be fair to both things happened. He did get a lot of small contributions.
Yes, he did.
And he did get a lot of large contributions.
Yes,
and
he
you're
did.
right about him not taking public financing.
Yeah.
But, I think that the bigger issue is what he did after he got elected. Okay, because in the trailer there, one of the people said there is no beginning, middle, and end. There's just a middle.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I think that there could be an end, right? If we tried.
Yeah.
And Obama said fundamental change you can believe in, and then what would have been, in my opinion, fundamental change is if he came in and instead of going issue by issue, which was very important and had to be done, right? But said, look, first, we're going to do public financing of campaigns, period, right? So a guy like me doesn't even have a choice anymore, right? And it's not going to be matching. It's going to be public financing of campaigns.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you with me that is the central issue? Like, now, there are many other things you'd have to do, okay? But that would be the center block because either we pay the politicians, right, or somebody else does. And if somebody else pays for them, they're going to be their boss.
Since it takes money to get elected, that's the case. But so let me just say right now, I've got nothing against lobbying. I've got nothing against lobbyists. I was originally from the UK. Well, there are lots of lobbyists hanging around the Houses of Parliament. In Brussels, at the European Community, there are hundreds of lobbyists hanging around, but they can't give you money to be elected. All they can do is try to convince you of their case, whatever it happens to be. And frankly, the public has an equal shot at that.
No, that's great.
It's not a matter of being outspent. It's the connection between lobbying and campaign finance which is so pernicious.
Right. And look, when you get into the issue of what can you give money for, how, those are interesting, tricky issues, right? And I think there is a freedom of speech issue. Now, I don't think corporations are human beings. I don't think they have First Amendment rights. I know the funny thing is, I'm the crazy guy now. Like, they're like, the Supreme Court will be like, "Oh, are you crazy? Of course corporations are human beings." Like, what? No, but wait a minute, but they're not. You've turned logic and truth on its head.
But wasn't the appointment of Justice Roberts crucial?
Absolutely. And I remember at the time, it was, no, Roberts is moderate. It's okay. I said, based on what? He's got a nice smile. His voting record is 100% conservative. There's nothing moderate about him at all.
No.
100% in
and
favor
Alito.
But they said, no, they're going to keep their powder dry so they could fight Alito. And when Alito came, well, you know what happened. So,
of course. But it's not only the voting record of the Supreme Court, it's the cases they've chosen to take. They've chosen to take a lot of cases which are about the interests of the individual versus the interests of the corporation, and they've almost entirely voted for the corporation in those particular cases.
All right, so do you see hope here, Francis? And we're talking to Francis Megahy. He is the filmmaker behind The Best Government Money Can Buy. Very interesting documentary on this topic. What's the hope here? I mean, and let me just preface that by saying I saw Obama last night on The Daily Show, and I thought Stewart did a brilliant job of asking him questions. And I get the sense at the end of the interview, and that's why I liked the interview so much, that I got a better sense of where Obama stood. And my sense was he hasn't learned a lesson. Like, he's not, it's not like in the next 2 years he's going to be like, oh, I got right, fundamental change, right. We got to change the heart of the problem. We got to do public finance campaigns, whatever. No sense of that whatsoever.
No.
So is there hope?
Well, the only hope is to ventilate the issue. The only hope is to tell people what's going on, because one of the interesting things you'll see in the documentary film is that the lobbyists either write or hand the text of legislation to lawmakers who then put it into the legislation. This is outrageous. This is astonishing. And one of the penalties that we pay for the cost of campaigns and the constant need to raise money is, these are things I didn't know before. I thought I was a political sophisticate. I went to Washington and found out how naive I was. I didn't know these people are only in D.C. 3 days a week because they're out raising money to get reelected. And so there's a scene in the film where a very nice, charming, interesting, smart man who's a lobbyist, you've got to be that to be successful, is showing me the events board in the Capitol Hill Club, a Republican stronghold on the Hill, and he's telling me what's on Tuesday evening and what's on Wednesday evening and what's on Thursday evening. But there's nothing on Monday evening or Friday evening because the members aren't in town.
Right. Yeah. No.
So we elect them to do our work, and they're spending at the most about 60% of their time on it. Think how much more efficient the Congress would be if they didn't have to do that.
Right. And, it goes back to the same issue. How in the world, people work for the people who pay them. And if they get paid by these guys, of course they're going to do their bidding. Of course, whether they're Republicans or whether they're Democrats. And it seems to me, and I'm being tough on Obama here again, but it doesn't seem to me that he has the courage to take on his own party. Because, I think barely has the courage to take on the Republicans. And now I'm being tough, but look, I got to be honest, that's what I think. But to go to conservative Democrats, they call them nodders now. What they are is corporatists. Okay.
Yes.
And he can't go for Obama to go to corporatist Democrats and say, "I'm going to call you out."
Yeah.
It seems inconceivable.
Yeah.
So, but what I think, Francis, finally, is I think the only way we do this is, like you said, we tell everybody the message.
That's right.
And that we can actually, believe it or not, and I know this is really, really hard, but I think we can rally Republicans, voters, and right-wingers and conservatives to this same issue.
This should be their issue. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. And there are a lot of people in the House and in the Senate who would like this to change. They don't like spending their time on this. Now, there's a lot of cynical people as well, and we tend to be skeptical and think, politicians, But a heck of a lot of them go to D.C. wanting to do good for the country, and they become corrupted by this process. Not in the sense that they become bad people, but whether they like it or not. The guys you mentioned, at the beginning, whether they like it or not, they just have to do this. They have no choice. Even a lot of lobbyists don't like it. You'll see them in the film. So, they dread the call from the guy who did them a favor and voted the way they were hoping he would vote, and a month later he'll call them and say, "You wouldn't mind having a fundraiser for me, would you?" Well, if you want to get to speak to him again, you'll have that fundraiser.
Of course.
There's actually quite a lot of opposition to it, but it has to be ventilated, and they have to believe the voters want it. The voters don't know about it.
And the thing is, it's so pernicious. Last thing on this is that, look, the corporate interests and the moneyed interests capture the politicians so quick. It's not even after they go to Washington. Look at what happened with the Tea Party people. Tea Party people are just as mad as we are about this system. Like, if you ask a Tea Party person, a voter, a real Tea Party grassroots people, there are, right? And you ask them, you say, "Do you think our politicians are bought?" My guess is 98% of them will say yes.
That's right.
Okay? So they're on our side, right? But the Tea Party candidates are already bought. Joe Miller how do you think he won in Alaska? He got $600,000 from outside groups who are funded by corporate interests, and they've already bought his vote.
By the Koch brothers.
Right, the Koch brothers, Christine O'Donnell, and you go down the list. They've all already been bought. They won their primaries with the money they got bought with.
Oh, that's right, absolutely. Yeah, you'll see in the film, in Obama's Iowa primary, he spent $400 for every voter.
And then that was a triumph in grassroots politics, they said in Iowa.
Yes.
All right. Francis Megahy, it's been great having you on here. The movie's called The Best Government Money Can Buy. Thank you so much for dropping it.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Great to have you. Young Turks.